Alright, at ito nga no, ang hirap-hirap gumawa ng video kapag ka nasa bahay ka talaga. Ang dami-daming concerns and consolidations. Maingay, ang hirap kahit nasa kwarto ka. Ang hirap-hirap gumawa pa rin. Anyhow, andito na tayo and we're going to talk about the chapter 13. Isang mapagpalang araw po sa inyo mga minamahal kong kapatid, lalong-lalo na sa ating mga formators ng ICST. Ayan po fathers, sana po nasa maayos po kayo kalagayan. At syempre sa inyo, ng mga kaibigan na nasa kanilang mga bahay-bahay sa panahon ito, mag-ingat-ingat po tayo and stay safe at home. Today, we're going to talk about chapter 13 on concerns and consolidations of Pope John Paul II. In this chapter, the term concern and consolidation sum up the trust of Pope John Paul's papacy during the period of 1981. This was the time when Vatican appeared anxious about many things, about many aspects of church life, and made strong efforts to reinforce and consolidate traditional teachings. There were so many concerns. Number 1. John Paul took a numerous pastoral visit each year to various parts of the world. On many of these occasions, he took out the opportunity to speak out strongly against injustice of various kinds. Makibak, huwag matakot. Number 2. He spoke out strongly on the issue of political oppression and even challenged governments directly. So sino nagsasabi na walang ginagawa ang simbahan? Dati pa lang, gumagalaw na ang simbahan. Gumagawa na ng paraan para lamang matugunan ang kangailangan ng mga tao at makamit ang hustisya sa lahat ng aspeto ng ating pamumuhay. Number 3. This may be related to the ongoing concern of Rome about the excesses of liberation theologians and the Vatican's sustained efforts to counteract their influences. Number 4. One of the many concerns of Pope John Paul is the outrage in the face of regimes that were blatantly oppressive and his fear that the Church's role might be reduced to that of working for political and economic liberation. Most especially, it is seen in the Marxist term. Number 5. The instrumentalization of the gospel to its subjection to the ideology. Number 6. He also warned the priests and members of the religious communities not to confuse their roles to that of political organizers when he said, "Remember that you are not social directors, political leaders, or officials of temporal power." Number 7. There is injustice and equitable distribution of food and freedom of expression of opinions. Number 8. Oppressions was made particular to the group of people who were indigenous, such as the American Indians of Guatemala. Number 9. The Pope stressed the importance of solidarity to one another, the participation of each and everyone, and the need for a cultural transformation of society. Number 10. The 1986 document entitled At the Service of the Human Community, An Ethical Approach to the International Question, wherein it explores the problem of debt in some detail, pointing out the burdens imposed on the poor nations, especially on the poorer people. The document was by no means radical in its analysis or its proposals. For instance, it did not condone the idea that debtor nations should repudiate their debts unilaterally or that payment defaults should be allowed to happen. It did, however, suggest that in the cases of the poorest nations, the loans should be converted by the creditors into grants. It did not put forward any serious and sustained criticism of the policies of the International Monetary Fund or the IMF, on the grounds that it is not up to the Church to judge the economic financial theories behind their analysis and the remedies proposed. So what are the proposals put forward in the document? First, the international creditors should take immediate action to meet emergency situations. Second, as part of a more long-term solution, they should reduce interest rates, reschedule debts, and eliminate protectionist measures that hinder exports from poorer countries. Now, the document went on to suggest that international financial agencies, the World Bank, the IMF, and so on, should have more representatives for developing countries and should allow these countries a greater share in determining their policies. The guiding principles of the authors was that people and their needs should be given priority over financial rectitude. However, Pope John Paul II spoke occasionally on the issue of debt, following much the same lines as those of the Council for Justice and Peace. And because of these concerns, there came a new social encyclical. The 20th anniversary of Populorum Progressio was in 1987. John Paul commemorated it, issuing his second social encyclical, Solicitudo Rei Socialis, known in English as On Social Concerns. The main contribution of this document lay in its teaching on solidarity. And the main purpose of the document was to meet the need for a fuller and more nuanced concept of development in continuity with the Populorum Progressio being more rather than having more. In a wider sense, what does solidarity mean? Pope Paul VI began with the account of self-fulfillment. First, he spells out the fact of interdependence and on how we relate to each other in the economic, cultural, political, and so on. Second, solidarity is a more response to the fact of interdependence. This is a moral call to overcome distrust and to collaborate with them instead. Third, the act of collaboration springs from the virtue of solidarity. Number 4. The virtue of solidarity transforms the interpersonal relationship of individuals with the people around them. Number 5. The virtue of solidarity is exercised also by whole nations in their relationship with other nations. Number 6. By transforming the relationships between individuals and nations, the virtue of solidarity brings about a radical change in society as a whole. Number 7. One must speak not merely of human solidarity, but even of ecological solidarity. Oneness with nature. Finally, there is a matter of what happens if the people refuse the challenge to be in solidarity with others. Ano, tinatanggap mo ba ang hamon? Be in a solidarity with others. And now, let's talk about solidarity as a virtue. It is an attitude or a commitment on the part of those who form a community to participate in the life of that community in a way that it promotes the common good. Moreover, solidarity helps us to see the other, whether a person, people, or a nation, and not just some king of work capacity and a physical strength to be exploited and discarded when no longer useful. And now, let's talk about encyclical on mission. At the end of the 1990, Pope John Paul issued an encyclical entitled Redemptoris Missio. The points are relevant to the issue of justice, poverty, and liberation. It gives a rounded and valuable account of the evangelizing role of the Church. Pope John Paul's third encyclical entitled Rerum Novarum was very much anticipated, and many of the people begged for a council for justice and peace. A new encyclical was being published entitled Centesimus Annus on May 1991. Over against liberalism, Rerum Novarum defended the principle of solidarity, even though Leo did not employ his term, but instead used the word friendship as a technical term. John Paul sees Rerum Novarum as an excellent testimony to the continuity within the Church of the so-called preferential option for the poor. Now the question, was John Paul accepting capitalism? There are two issues arose in relation to the teaching of the encyclical, whether the Pope is accepting capitalism and whether he is rejecting the notion of the welfare state. According to Daniel Finn, the interplay of the two principles of subsidiary and the solidarity sets the stage of John Paul's careful moral assessment of capitalism, where subsidiary argues for the respectful recognition of individual economic initiative. Solidarity calls for a strong communal action to prevent abuses and ensure the common good. However, John Paul distinguishes two meanings of the word capitalism and accepts one of them, though he prefers to use terms as business economy, market economy, or free economy. There is an acceptable concept of capitalism. It is when there is an absolute predominance of capital. John Paul is not really giving approval to capitalism as the correct system. He is simply laying down certain conditions for any acceptable model of society, namely the right to own but to sell goods and the right to take other economic initiatives. While they need to be controlled, it must not entirely be abolished. The Church is not entitled to express preferences for this or that institutional or constitutional solution. Now, let's talk about the property and work. There are some important points emerged on the letter of John Paul. First, his firm insistence on the universal destination of the goods of the earth. Second, he addressed the issue of employment. Here, the state has a duty to sustain business activities by creating conditions which will ensure job opportunities by stimulating those activities where they are lacking or by supporting them in moments of crisis. And lastly, John Paul is attempting to apply the traditional principles and guidelines to the contemporary situation. And so that's all. Thank you very much and may God bless you.